You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible.
Well, the CDC has now declared that racism is a new serious public health threat. The CDC is the largest federal agency to acknowledge the issue as a threat. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky said in a statement published on the agency's website, a growing body of research shows that centuries of racism in this country has had a profound and negative impact on communities of color. Confronting the impact of racism will not be easy. I know that we can do this if we work together. I certainly hope you will lean in and join me. The nation's leading public health agency established the web portal Racism and Health to serve as a hub for activities and promote a public discourse on how racism negatively affects health and communicates potential solutions. This is important, Johanna, to acknowledge, because when we look at health issues, when we look at the health of African Americans, the stress associated, all those things that go into this, the role that the racism plays. And again, for folks who are white in this country, who don't have to deal with microaggressions, who don't have to deal with what we do, this is greatly significant.
Yeah, and I agree. It is a crisis, and it is something that racism in particular that we should really address and go to the root cause and not just put a Band-Aid on it. Because I think what we have been doing for the past decade or so is we've been putting a Band-Aid on the issue of racism. But when it comes to inequalities and disparities in this country, the numbers don't look good for people of color. There was a Senate report released in 2019 about the state of Black America. And here are some daunting numbers, Roland. The median wealth of Black families is $17,000, which is less than 1/10 of that of white families, which is $171,000 US. And then we all know the quickest way to gain wealth in America is through home ownership. Well, the data shows that much less than 42% of Black families own their homes, compared to almost 3/4, which is 73% of white families. And also, one last point. The typical Black households earn a fraction of white households, just 59% on every dollar. The gap between Black and white annually household incomes is about $29,000 per year. Now, these systemic injustices, and when you look at the data, when people go on and they attain higher education, they receive professional degrees and so forth, but you don't see that much shift in terms of the inequalities between wealth from white people. So the data is there. Even when Black people take the appropriate steps, do the right thing, follow the law, you go to school, you are a law-abiding citizen, you go to church, right? You do all the things that society tells you to do. The inequality still exists, which is a serious public health crisis, because when you are faced with these challenges, guess what? It impacts your health. It impacts your ability to engage in day-to-day activities. And I know the Black woman, we are so strong and we are so brave, but so many of us are dealing with these issues internally in the workplace, and it is impacting our health, and we bring it to the household, and it impacts the way we interact with our families and with our children and so on. So I agree with the doctor. It is a serious public health crisis, and it should have been declared decades ago, not today.
Rob.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've seen a lot of these, and so I'm going to take a little bit of a different view. Like, water is wet. Yes, it's been a crisis. Now, because I've seen a lot of state legislators, they do these little resolutions to say, like, racism is a public crisis. Yes, it's been. My next step is always, then what? Like, what are we doing about it? What specifically are we going to do? How much money are we going to allocate to this? What's our steps? What's our plans and policies that change? Because it's been it's been a serious crisis for a really long time. So yes, I'm glad they acknowledged it, but I'm like, okay, now what? Because we have some issues that we need to get solved, and I'm glad they acknowledge it. But I'm now kind of over that. It's like people saying Black Lives Matter. Okay, slow clap. Now what? Like what are we going to do to change things? That's kind of my perspective on this.
And the reality, Michael, now you see the CDC. How are you now going to take this and integrate this into public policy?
Yes, policy has to follow behind this, Roland. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy. This is for the purpose of preserving genetic white survival. This is significant here that the CDC director is saying this, Dr. Walensky. And also, the American Medical Association said something very similar back in November of 2020 as well. And that is the American Medical Association. President Susan Bailey put out a statement on Thursday, April 8th, basically backing this up and also talking about the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had disproportionately on African-American and Hispanic communities. So policy has to follow this. And this is why, and all this also ties into, a lot of this also ties into the $2 trillion plus infrastructure bill that Joe Biden just unveiled, because
and Joe Manchin pretty much tried to cancel. But go ahead.
Yeah, Joe Manchin tried to. Well, Joe Manchin is in West Virginia.
I digress. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I took. Go ahead.
You know, we know Joe Manchin's game, but there's a history behind racism and infrastructure and U.S. highways. Okay, the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts in 1952 and 1956 drove somewhere around 41,000 miles of interstate highway across the country, but they ran right through African-American communities, wiping out a lot of our homes, wiping out a lot of our businesses, disrupting our communities. So that this right here, dealing with racism, is we see this in all aspects of society. So you have to have policy that addresses this to correct this. Okay, this is why this is so important. And lastly, you know, this ties into the study from Citigroup Bank that came out September 2020 that dealt with how the U.S. economy has lost $16 trillion over the past 20 years, from the year 2000 to the year 2020, and it's because of policies dealing with racism. And but one thing that's important that it says is that if you can correct these structural inequities, then over the next 5 years, the U.S. economy can grow by $5 trillion. So there's an incentive to create this. Something important that Citigroup study shows is that how racism negatively impacts everybody, including many white people who think they benefit from racism. It shows how it even negatively impacts you as well. So this is a good first step, but we have to have policy behind it.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.